This is the Grapple Show, episode 28, The Flatliner. Hello, just a quick note before we kick into the episode. We did have a couple of little audio moments in this episode with our Wi-Fi issues sort of slowing down the recording, etc. We've done our best to sort those out for you on this recording, on this show. So please bear with us. If it does go a little bit crackly, it does get sorted really quickly. Thank you very much. This is the Grapple Show, episode 28. I'm your host, Brett Summers, and my guest today is the one and only Flatliner, professional wrestling's legend. How are you, sir?
All good. Cheers for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem at all, sir. And now, for our first-time guests, we always ask a question about their journey, whether it be martial arts, grappling, whatever it might be. Where did it begin for you, sir?
For me, it all began when I was a kid, when I was in Bournemouth on a day out with my mum and dad, and I saw a Big Daddy poster. And I just stood there staring at it. I'd seen him on telly, but I wasn't a wrestling fan, but everybody in the 80s knew Big Daddy. So, like, my dad said, do you want to go to it? So we went along, and, like, it just blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like it. Do you know what I mean? Like, but prior to that, I was probably into Star Wars and He-Man, all sort of like fantasy. And it's almost like you had these larger than life characters, and it was just amazing. It blew my mind. And so, like, from there, like, I started going to more shows. If I went into old bookshops, I'd try and find old wrestling books or what have you, because there was not a lot about, I mean, like, if you went in Toys R Us, they might have some like old 1985 LJNs in there, like Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, like, the ones that nobody had left. Or nobody wanted, so I should say, what I mean, the leftovers from like, 10 years earlier or something. But like, I just absolutely loved it. Do you know what I mean? And then, like I said, I went to the Southampton Guildhall a lot, Bournemouth International Centre. Sorry, not the International Centre, the Pavilion. I used to go to Salisbury, sometimes Brighton. My dad used to enjoy taking me. My mum didn't really like it, but you know what I mean? It's one of those ones. I take my son, or I don't now, he's too old, but I used to take him to metal gigs. It's not my thing, but I did. It was nice to be in a room full of people that looked like me, but I knew how to wash and use soap and water. But like at the end of the day, so like, yeah, loved watching wrestling. Got to see a couple of WWE shows. I can remember being elated that Davey Boy Smith sat out the back of the Brighton Arena and signed autographs in his car. We just couldn't, it was like really meeting a superstar. And then as I got to about 14, 15, I sort of like, over here in the UK, Brian Dixon was doing a tribute show. So it was a lot of English wrestlers dressing up like, or imitating WWE wrestlers. You might have one or two on the bill, like PN News from WCW or the Dynamite Kid who was on his last legs. And it was kind of misleading. I went to the Portsmouth Guildhall one night to watch a show, and it was sold out because everyone thought it was an American, like, WWE type event. And it wasn't that. But like, I just kind of thought, well, nah, this is going. I don't know. I found like, I got into bodybuilding and girls and partying like you do. And then I used to compete in the bodybuilding classes. Like when I was I started training at 14, which was mad back then because there was no 14-year-olds in the gym. So you had to behave yourself, and you had to want to become, you became older than your years because you was just hanging around with all these, like, bodybuilding was still a bit of a subculture, and not everyone was on roids. Do you know what I mean? So I'd go down this gym and train and Fairham, and they had a wrestling ring up it. And by this point, I mean I'd done topless waitering and anything to have a bit of a giggle and a show off. I was up for it, And there happened to be a wrestling ring in this gym. It's now a Weatherspoons in Fareham, but there was a wrestling ring, and I was like, oh, I used to love all this when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? And he said, oh, would you fancy having a go? And at the time, I was dating a stripper, and this is where the beard came from. She was dyeing her hair blonde, and I'd finally sort of we suddenly got rid of that candy floss sort of, horrible fluff you grow. You can actually grow a proper beard. And I said, can you go? And we put that on. So by this point, everywhere I used to go, because I've always been sort of, especially when I was younger, I was a lot more muscular than I am now. But at 21, I was 20 stone and I had this white beard and, I've always looked about 50. But even before I was wrestling, people used to always, make comments about, are you a wrestler, mate? No, I just work out. And then, like I said, when I saw this wrestling ring in the gym in Fareham, I was like, oh, I used to watch all this as a kid and what have you. And they got me in there, and we did I can't really call it training because I was just sort of mimicking what I used to watch. Do you know what I mean? And it's not. This always this sort of could get taken or misconstrued, but I used to enjoy. If it was larger than life and you went to the Southampton Guildhall yourself, so when it had the Mongolian Mauler there, or you had Kendo Nagasaki or Haystacks, or when it was all really larger than life, I loved all that, and I loved all the gimmicks. Whereas when say you know, say you get two really good lightweights on having a really technical match, I'll probably go and look at the programs or go and use the toilet. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not, and it's like I said, it's not. I'm not disrespecting it because I can't do it, but that was just never the thing that really attracted me. It was all the, it's I wrestled with a dwarf. I met. And I'm jumping forward, but when I met a little fella that could walk on his hands and was I said, look, would you like to be a wrestler? And he's like, yeah. Everyone was like, well, who's he going to wrestle? I said, well, it's little and large. He'll run through their legs. He'll go over the top of them. And he did take to it like a duck to water. It's not something that we're say somebody watches Ring of Honor or Japanese wrestling would like. But by and large in the UK, it's a family show. If you want to have a packed house, it's okay if you want to have a big room full of Dungeons and Dragon Trekkie types saying that wasn't good, that was bad, that critiquing everything. But for me, it should be larger in life, and that's what I really enjoyed, and that's always what I try to emulate, in my own way. But of course, so I got in with these guys, and I was told that they started up this promotion because if you go, oh yeah, because I asked what's happened to Rollerball Rocco, and that's horrible. If you went to start with them, they're really horrible to you, and they won't talk to you, and what they were saying is that these guys that spare ribs and had never worked out in their life, and they made a fortune selling the mirrors in their house because I don't know what they used to see looking back at them. They're all little skinny lads in t-shirts, which didn't bother me because I look bloody magnificent next to them, and I could pick them up like rag dolls and fling them. And I didn't get on with them either. They weren't my type of people. And I wasn't their type of person either. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, there was a wrestler from Southampton who he recently just had to go to. He recently passed away, and we was both at his wake. And he used to run an auction, Scott Conway. He used to wrestle as Scott the Body. For anyone who didn't know him, his old gimmick was he was a bit like myself. He was a comedy wrestler, although he was a villain. And he had the body of Johnny Vegas. And he'd walk out, not even flex, and go, "How's about that for a body?" And he was good at what he did. And he also was a promoter, and he also ran auctions when he wasn't wrestling. So my father went to auction. He said, "Would my son's a wrestler?" Or I thought I was a wrestler at the time. I was far from a wrestler. And he said, would you like to? He took a photo along, and of course, at the time, most wrestlers are either super heavyweights, slightly athletic, or dad bod. Do you know what I mean? It was way before any, and like I said, most wrestlers in this country didn't work out. There was very few. Like you had Dave Taylor, Dave Finlay, Robbie Hagan, but there wasn't an abundance of like muscle men. And when I was in my
Yeah.
twenties, and I never took steroids or stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So I was just naturally a big lad with a size 14 shoe, and I went along to a Scott show, and like when I turned up, there was all these wrestlers I watched as a kid, and I know what this is like now because I've had it where kids come up to me when I'm working the door. Well, I say the kid, they're adults that come up to you, but when I was single, I'd have girls come up to me and go, "Oh, you're a wrestler," and when you've had a drink, like a tosser, you puff your chest out, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm a wrestler." Yeah, I've got a photo of you when I was seven on the fridge at home when you came to my school. Yeah, go away. I'm not Gary Glitter. So you know what I mean? But like I went up to all these wrestlers. Oh, I used to watch you as a kid, a big lump who looks about 50, even though I'm
Yeah.
21. So that didn't enamor me to anyone. They're all like, yeah, cheers for that, sod off. And there was like Skull Murphy, Klondike Kate, Shane Stevens, and like Cole Kramer. And I'm like, with you, mate, 30 stone, I can't do nothing. Anyway, you can do stuff that you can't. And then I went out there, forgot the whole thing. It was absolutely rotten. All the wrestlers were watching through the back of well, it was a kitchen at the back of the Weymouth
Yeah.
Pavilion. And I come back and they're all sticking their hands up under their armpits, meaning rotten. And it was almost like, you got to remember there was not many, there was very, very, very few wrestling schools. This is the thing now. Wrestling's like karate. You can go and join. You can see an advert wherever and wrestling school.
Almost
And
need
like
to know basis in those days, wasn't it?
well, yeah, it was, and certainly
Yeah.
not down south. You know what I mean? All right, you had FWA, but that was really like an offshoot. And what's funny about it is they said, "Oh yeah, we made it so that it's nice, we're all friendly," and it became more horrible and catty than the what they would call old school or the traditional way ever was. But anyway, um, so yeah, I started, and also like I always say this is that like at 21, I mean, I had a horrible time at school. I didn't like it. Had all the usual problems that people have, bullying and not fitting in and what have you. And I always said that's why I went to the gym so that I made myself big and scary looking, so nobody messed with me. And
Yeah.
then so it's like up a ladder and down a snake because when I came in, the first thing everyone's saying is, you take steroids, don't you? And I said, no, I don't take steroids. You fucking do. I mean, no, I don't. I don't. Nah, yeah, you're on steroids, obvious. What do you reckon? And like a youngster who's naive, I bit like, it was just like literally like they was doing it more because the way I reacted. You get me?
Yeah.
Yeah, just winding you up. But like I said, at 21, being a big lump and like doing door work and debt collecting and things like that, I needed knocking down a few pegs because I came in and like of all the things to say one day because like they're all on me and I went, yeah, well, yeah, you can't wrestle. Oh, I don't need to wrestle. I've got 21-inch arms. That really enamored me to people that spent years learning how to do lock holds and you know what I mean, and so like I'd go in with some people. They you'd always learn something, but some people would like be gracious enough to give you a good match, and other people would be like just make you look an absolute fool out there, batter you, and tell you were crap and what you're doing. And it's like eventually, like I tried villain. I used to be the bad guy. I'd be walking out spitting water and insulting everybody. I did trying to be the heroic, like big guy, blue eye. But the truth of the matter is, at school I was the class clown, and like I don't take life very seriously, and I like a good giggle. So it turned out that your best bet is to be an extension of yourself, and like I'm well known in wrestling for being badly behaved and getting up to mischief. I mean, I'm nearly 50 now, so like I'm not as bad as I used to be. I'm a dad now and what have you. But like when you're good, no one remembers. When you're bad, no one forgets. And yeah, it's sort of like I got humbled in loads of different ways, be it like pranks pulled on you, and also being told quite right. So who do you think you are? You've walked into this environment like who are you? Some big lump, great. You can't. and you'd be thrown out on the motorway. You'd be, they had a thing called a wrestler's license. Have you got a wrestler's license? No, I didn't know about. What do you mean you didn't know about a wrestler's license? What's that all about? Oh, so now nobody's talking to you because you haven't got a wrestler's license, and it's just one of those, like, it's sort of, you learn not to take yourself too seriously and be too far up your own arse. You learn to be, I always had respect for my peers, so that was never really a problem. But sometimes, like, you could just overstep the mark, and and there's times I used to lock myself in the toilet and have a cry. You know what I mean? And when it goes badly wrong, it's just like going out and doing. This is a fighting art. People will think that wrestling is just it's all kidology and whatever. You just see some of the people and the injuries they've got, and also so we know it's predetermined, but sometimes having to go on with someone that you really despise and you don't like, it's very hard if they catch you or they're being clumsy, not to what you call a receipt and bang them one back. And the thing is that, like, that's not what it should be about. It should be the best night they've had in a long time. You know what I mean?
Let's go back a second
So
into the
yeah.
actual like the wrestling side of it. So you come in, as I say, you've got the body size, and your bodybuilding stuff. You come in. What sort of things were you having to learn? Because I know you said you're not into the technicalities of all the wrestling stuff, but there must have been certain things
Well,
that you needed to learn and master.
yeah. You had. Yeah, it's crazy. Like learning to bump. For a long time, my bumps are crap. Like trying to chuck both feet in the air and take a crisp bump. Because when are you going to do that in any other circumstance? You know what I mean? It doesn't hurt, but it's just So like I was taught to, people. I'd have people on all fours behind me, and I'd get pushed, and they'd say, "Right, there you go, you got to do that." And you think, "Oh, that didn't hurt," and then you learn how to take a good bump. You learn how to run the ropes. You know what I mean? A good lock up, take an arm, headlock. You have to learn a lot of. You have to learn like your fundamentals and your basics. And being 20 stone or whatever I was when I started, there's no chance of me doing bloody moonsaults and that sort of thing. For me, my thing was always based on look and also having giving the crowd something to laugh at, because
Yeah,
that was always a good, laughter is a good cross communicator. If I was at Butlins, we get a fantastic reaction because even if they weren't interested, they'd be laughing. But you'd have to learn, just etiquette is a massive one because it's such a subculture. You come in and there's terms that you don't know. There's just a whole language. It's all to itself. It's not carny, but there is it's I don't know. That's the sad thing about it is that when I came in, I was quite lucky in the fact that although I needed a lot of work, and although I needed a lot of polish and a lot of attitude adjustment and everything, they saw something in me because if it weren't for that, then why did they keep booking me? Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
And you say to the promoter at the end of the night, "Oh, how was the match?" "Oh, fucking rotten." I'd go up to the promoter. I remember once I went up to Scott in front of Earthquake, the WWE wrestler, and I said, "Oh, do you need us for any more of the desperate? We'll call you." And "Oh, not in front of Earthquake." Do you know what I mean? But again, you learn that you did learn how not to take yourself too serious and sort of know your place on the card. We're all egomaniacs, or we wouldn't do it. Do you know what I mean? We've all got you've all got to have some sort of bit about you that wants to show off and peacock it, or you're kind of in the wrong job. But at the same time, you can't be a showman without a show. And the other, the other aspect is cardio, because I mean, it's all right being a big lump and being, like 18 stone of muscle, but you could be a Rolls Royce with a Skoda engine if you can't run around and you're. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, if people watch any matches on YouTube, there's plenty of ones where I'm blowing out my hoop. But I mean, it's amazing how you have to be ring fit. You know what I mean? You can't just step in there, because otherwise you'll just blow in. I've seen people throw up and everything. You know what I mean? So it's you know what I mean. You've got to make sure you've got your cardio and conditioning in, and then you know what I mean. Like I said, it was hard. I had to learn on the fly. So I would go in with some people. And they try and train. They try you in all types of different matches within reason. Also, you've got to think of like the crowd. What are the crowd going to see? They need to see something that looks half decent. There's no good putting people on that don't gel, or you know what I mean. So there was like in the beginning, like it's so mad, unfortunately, like the internet and FWA, and like suddenly everything now is exposed. The Magic Circle, the Freemasons, wrestling. There's no mystique to any of it anymore. One of the, like I said, the now when I came into the job, it was for select. It was a select, you either had it or you didn't. Like when they have the X Factor on the telly, there's a thing called the X Factor. It's not about if you can just sing. It's not about if you can just look pretty. You've got to have something. You have the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, like, it was your attitude and your ebb. You got to remember, like, this back in the day, before when there was kayfabe, you couldn't have a guy that was going to walk into the pub and not be able to handle it. Do you know what I mean? If people started taking the piss and saying I mean, I've been there with Skull Murphy when people have gone up to him and said, it's all bent in it, and he stuck a grovet, a chokehold on them. And like, they're tapping and they're going mental, and it's really ruined the atmosphere. But like, that was what you had to do back in the day. You had to defend it, and you wouldn't go and say, "Oh yeah, it's all bent" or what have you. Do you know what I mean? You would hold it close to you. You know what I mean? And you wouldn't. No one would. You had to fight so hard to get into that. To get into the wrestling back in like, say, like, when we're going back to the 60s, I know a wrestler called Mickey Sullivan. People say it was fake. The guys would only let you apply a hold or give you something if you could take it. Do you know what I'm saying? It was only if they were going to allow you to do anything to them that they would let you do it. And if they respected you, they would let you take something. But a lot of the time, you had to earn that respect. And like, people say, well, that's daft. Like, why? But it's having respect and love and passion for what you do. I could open a wrestling school in Gosport tomorrow, and I could probably fill it, but I couldn't teach them a lot of aspects of wrestling, because I can't. I can't teach a load of people how to be me. I can teach comedy spots and say this might work in your match or whatever, but the entire thing, and especially what it is now with flips, moves, and all the acrobatics that go with it, I couldn't teach that. And I could bring someone in possibly to do it, but I wouldn't prostitute the business. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I could have a school where I'm charging people 20 quid, and it's like, it sounds horrible, but like, as much of anything, be it boxing, MMA, like, I'd love to be Olympic hurdler. My knees are shot, so I can't. Reality check. You can't be an Olympic hurdler. Do you know what I'm saying? But like, I've seen people turn up to these wrestling schools with kids going, yeah, my son's got asthma, a club foot, and a bog eye. Is he okay to be a wrestler? And then, oh yes, it's inclusive. And it's like, years ago they'd have been told, well, maybe you could be a referee, maybe you can be a second, maybe you can be a ring announcer, but you're not the right peg for the right hole to be a wrestler. Sorry to crush your dream. It's not to be unkind. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But now the problem is that there's loads of people walking around that will tell people, yeah, I'm a professional wrestler. Okay. And if they sort of laugh or go, what? Well, you should be saying I'm a professional wrestler. Oh, that's what we thought you were. Do you get me? And
Totally.
I don't know.
To me,
It's
to
just
me, it's
lost.
always been
It's
that.
just become. Go
I was
on.
just gonna say, to me, it's always been that I always call it like the pub test, a bit like what you said. If someone walks into a pub or into somewhere or into a room, don't have to be a pub actually, any room, as long as if
No, no, no. It
people
can
are
be
look,
anywhere. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if people are looking and wondering, then you've got something. If no one cares when you walk in, or no one, I mean, it could be that you're too big, too small, too big, fat, thin, whatever. But as long as you're walking in and there's something, people go like, "Who's that?" Then you've got
Yeah.
that's the test.
And some people have just got it, haven't they? I mean, like some
Yeah,
people haven't got to be. I mean, as a doorman, some people walk in and you look at them, and you think, "Oh, he looks a tasty bastard. I hope he behaves
yeah,
himself tonight." Do you know what I mean? Um, but like I said, the problem, and then the problem that comes from the training schools is that you've got a load of people that really, you know what I mean? Good luck to them that they enjoy it and they can do it. But unless you're going to go and get great gear, get yourself in half decent order, unless you're playing a parody of yourself, which a lot of these guys don't do, they walk out like they're Bill Goldberg and they look like, Battenberg. Do you know what I mean? They're like scrawny spare ribs. And it's like, it's so delusional. But then they then want to go on shows. And because they can't get booked on like regular shows or whatever, it just becomes this like, just this really bad, laughable. People go to a British wrestling show and they go, "Oh yeah, well, no wonder we're save up for a WWE event. That was crap." Well, they might go, "Well, the kids enjoyed it, but it should be a
yeah,
family show." When we did Butlins, we were in the top three favorite things I think 5 years running. Do you know what I mean? Because you had like, it was just a three-ring circus. You had Pierre News, like nearly 30 stone. You had the UK Pitbulls, two great big ginormous, like, super heavyweights. Brody Steele. Then you had people coming in from America like Daniel Bryan, Natty Neidhart. They weren't at the peak where they ended up, but they did
yeah.
their apprenticeship working for Butlins. And like, yeah, it was just it was a closed shop, and you either had it or you didn't. But now, don't get me wrong, All Star Promotions is still running 50 years on, and by Brian Dixon's daughter and Tony Spitfire, and like the standard is still way high, really high. Do you know what I mean? And they're still in prestigious, lovely big theatres and halls. And to do it right, there's a lot of hard work goes behind that, and it's just it's sad because like for me, like I run a show in I don't run the show, but I have a hand in the show that runs in my town. There's two shows that run, and like I always say, please go to the other one. I've got no problem. I'm not trying to put someone out of business, but you'll see the difference. And they always come back and say, "Yeah, your guys, like they look like wrestlers." They were like, "Oh, it's great," but the other guys, they don't really look like wrestlers. They don't really involve the crowd, and it's like they're out there like almost tossing themselves off, like that, like they're popping themselves. They're not popping the audience. Do you know what I mean? They're doing what they think they
That's
want to, what they think they want to see, and the audience wants a violent pantomime. You know?
Yeah. Well, see, people listening to this show, I mean, we've had like Dan Seven's been on here, we've had catch wrestlers, we've had jiu-jitsu champions, European and world champions, judo guy, we've had all these sorts of people and this caliber of people for the grappling. And as you know, I hold the pro wrestling in a high esteem as well. But if people listening to this are sort of saying, yeah, but that's or as I said, America, that's wrestling. What would you say
Yeah.
to that? Because I mean, I know like the training and the things that go into it, but
Well, all
what
I'd
would you
say is,
say to someone like,
I'd say this: like number one, like I said, any of my opinions for a start are like, you know what I mean. Please don't get triggered. Anyone, don't care what a meathead in a trailer thinks. All right. But like I said, with when I've done security in their game, when I've been to MMA and cage fights and all that sort of thing, I hate it when I'm stood near the crowd and they all go, "Oh look, he's crap." No, he had the balls to get in there and do it and fight a man for real. Okay, I'm not fighting somebody for real. I'm trying to put on a real physical theatre performance and try and touch you. I want you to feel you either want to be cheering me, booing me, happy for me, sad for me. Okay. And although I know what's coming, the impact, and in order to do it right, it does hurt. I mean, not when people say, "Is it fake?" Do you know what I mean? It's just a really insulting world. It's predetermined. I wouldn't insult your intelligence. We know that now. Once upon a time, I'll be sat here, and you know this. Once upon a time, I'll be sat there, like saying, "You say it's fake." I've even done it on the telly once years ago because I was still like in the old school mentality of trying to keep this stuff straight. And this TV show was pulling back the curtain, and they're talking to me like I'm a circus clown, going, "Oh, you're not really going to hurt each other, are you? So come here and I'll whack you. You tell me if it hurts, you know." And like it's one of them ones. I just think that like I can understand why someone who's a proper grappler or who does MMA or if you do anything in the ring sport peripheral, I massively respect what you do, but I can understand why I'm not going in there. There's an element of danger to what I do, but nowhere near the danger that you. I don't know. It's an hard one to say. Do you know what I mean? It's a different type of
I mean,
courage.
I would say maybe for a UFC type fighter who, although they do spar, etc., who has like 3 or 4 fights a year. I mean, how in your prime, how many fights do you have in a month?
Oh bloody hell! I'll have three a day sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like in the summer season when we've been doing like holiday camps and things like that, you're doing 3 shows a day and building a ring and taking it down, and you're all big blokes all sat in a van. Yeah, everyone's burping and farting, and like you breathe each other's feet and farts in the chalet at night. You're up the next day early. You're eating. It's easier now, but like back in the day, what I mean? It was like McDonald's or Indian or kebab, depending how late or where you were around. I mean, if you could find a cafe, I mean, like if you saw a Toby Carvery, you were going, oh, hallelujah. Do you know what I mean? Vegetables and gravy. Do you know what I mean? I don't want,
yeah.
I've eaten so many chips, I've got a square arsehole. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, it's a
And
passion, isn't
what
it? I
sort
mean,
of
I could say to someone who does I was going to say, like, for someone who does MMA, you got to
yeah,
get up in, if you got to get up in the morning and have your first run. And like, I knew a guy that competed, Matt Hughes, and his diet was like a boiled egg. And to get down to that fighting weight, I couldn't do it. But I haven't got the passion they've got for what they're doing to do that. Do you get me?
no,
It's like
yeah.
take people on at your game, not theirs, isn't it?
Exactly. And what sort of injuries have you picked up over time for a sport that's fake?
I've had my head split open, God knows how many times, concussions. I've broke my knee, I've broke my ribs. You know what I mean? It used to make me laugh because when I was younger, I'd come home if I got an injury. My mum and dad would be going absolutely mental, going, "Oh my god, it's all." And you think like, oh, you go to hospital and you're having stitches, and it's all fake and pretend that in it, and you're like, it's really, I mean, I'm not precious in any way, shape, or form. Do you know what I mean? I know what I am. I always say to the young lads down the gym, don't take yourself too serious. I live by the sea. I have a swim most mornings. In the summer, I'll come out the sea when I've got my tan and my beard done, and I'm all pumped up, and I think, don't I look marvellous? And someone will drive past in a car, lower nippers, and go, "Oh, Hogan, you tosser!" And I don't get upset because I make a rod for my own back. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's sort of like that's one thing I think's been helpful for me with the wrestlers. I've always been able to, although I've always had a job alongside it. I mean, I don't want to talk about the wages, but a bit like rock and roll. There's great bands out there, but they don't make fortunes. Do you know what I mean? It's the lucky ones that get signed and what have you. So, you know, it's just it's a massive passion. That's all you can say. It's a massive passion, and you just want to do it to the best of your abilities. And like for me, I always try and if people have got the right ebb, if I see guys in gyms, I'll say, "You ever thought of being a wrestler?" And the ones that always look absolutely out of this world are usually like quite timid, like shy people that no, it's not my cup of tea, mate. But also through doing that, like I said, I've got so many people into the job who like just like I said, like the dwarf I helped train little legs. Do you know what I mean? He was like, he was a huge huge attraction for a long time. You know what I'm saying? Every show, we got banned from Fernham Hall because somebody wrote in, and it was just when we all got mobile phones. Someone phoned me up and said, "Oh, what do you think about the dwarf being banned from Fernham Hall?" And I said, and I thought it was one of my mates from down the gym pissing about. So I go, "Yeah, all right, Sean, fuck off." Put the phone down, and then of course they run back. No, this is the evening news, and we understand that you wrestle with Little Legs, the dwarf, and that he's been barred from the venue because they don't agree with having a freak show in this day and age. I said, well, they showed Harry Potter in the kids' films in the summer holidays, and he was in that. They did not show that because it had dwarfs in it. And Anyway, so it was all in the papers. He still appeared, but he didn't wrestle. But then the Sunday Sport got hold of it and sent two topless girls down to Gravesend in the ring, let the dwarf wrestle. Wherever we went that week after being in the Sunday Sport, every cafe, every pub, all the builders, all the Herberts, everybody knew the two wrestlers, the dwarf and the wrestler. Do you know what I mean? They were the two wrestlers. And so, like, I did the thing with the little Mark, little legs, the dwarf. He got in the paper. And I was always thinking of ways to get in the paper, or like when I first retired, I used to be a topless waiter when I was younger. And then I met a guy who was a journalist and he used to come and drink in one of the places I worked at. And he was always thinking of things to get you in the paper. He said, I retired from topless waitering and stripping to wrestling because it was safer, because I was always getting false nails scratched on my ass and things like that. Um, then I got a part in a movie. So for Dave Courtney in his first film. It weren't the best film ever, but like that got in the paper. Eventually, I ended up on Trisha. Then Scott got a part for me. They needed a wrestler for the Graham Norton show. That led to doing Distraction with Jimmy Carr. And all these jobs, I was always on kind of best behaviour, and you check your ego with your bowels. They're both full of shit, so don't be going there like just be humble and be friendly and be polite. And from that I got kids programs, Best of Friends and Prank Patrol, which was just a nightmare where I lived, because at the time I lived in a studio flat near a kids park. Once I've been on it, all the time I got kids banging on my door going, "Oh, wrestler, you got any pictures, got any?" And I used to have to tell birds before they come round, like, again, don't think I'm a weirdo because all the kids knock my door. I do tell them that they shouldn't do it, but they're just, it's a local bloody, like, it's like what I said when I grew up. When I grew up, we had the man that danced at cars, Monkey Man, and all these like sort of like urban legend characters, and that's what I've sort of become to the kids around here. Everyone knows a wrestler with a dead badger on his chin who looks like a giant pirate. So it's just, and it's nice. It's nice that they remember you, and when you see them, they come up to you like little waggy dogs. And like where I work on the door, I used to work in a pub that was known as one of the most violent, horrible pubs in Gosport. And I'm not saying that to sound tough or put myself over or sound gangster, but like the police came down one night and they said, look, this pub is the worst pub in Gosport. It was called the George and Dragon. It's closed down now. But they said, this is the worst pub in Gosport, a prime location for a murder. But because you're like bloody Willy Wonka or Father Christmas, everyone's good for you, isn't they? And I said, yeah, they behave because they want to, not because they've got to. Do you know what I mean? And the proof was in the pudding, because during lockdown, the bloke who owned the pub never like got in touch once, wouldn't answer his phone. And then when his pub he wanted his pub reopening, he's like, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I found new employment now, unless you can match what I'm getting now, a new venue." And he's and I'd worked for him for 10 years, and he put, "Oh well, thanks for your hard work. Sorry to hear about your mum because she passed during lockdown. And can you find me two new doormen?" I was so pissed off about it. My wife, she said, "You're coming across really lemon on Instagram." I went, "Yeah, I'm lemon as anything. I put up every day on my story. George and Dragon opens Friday. I no longer work there. If you were barred, you're not anymore. Go down and fucking destroy the place. Not my problem." And it worked like a charm. It lasted 6 months, and they put two shirt fillers with, charisma bypasses on a power trip. The windows got put through, like, and it ended up just becoming a trouble spot and shut down 6 months later. And I hate to say it, I could have pleasured myself to that. I put that in a pleasant way. Do you know what I mean? I was like, yes, patience is the weapon of the hunter.
Fair enough.
So
Well,
there
what
we
would you
go.
say?
There's a little rant for you.
Yeah, that is all fair comment. What was I going to say? Yeah, what would you say then? Because obviously with professional wrestling, there's been crossover over the years, and it seems to be getting more and more now. I mean, I'm thinking about like Ken Shamwell, Gene LaBelle, actually maybe, and then you have like the judo guys coming into wrestling. You had Pete Roberts, Doug Williams, Chris
Yeah, I
Adams,
mean,
and
I
more and more.
wrestled. I was going to say I wrestled one guy, and like I didn't know who he was when I wrestled him. So I was in Germany, which is like short. Like if I'd have said when I started I wanted to be a WWE superstar, I might as well said I wanted to be an astronaut. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
it was like there was a very, very, very select few, especially from this country, that went to that level. But as a kid, all the we were talking about this the other day, but all
yeah.
the programs talked about the Germany tournaments,
Yeah,
and I went to
Germany
Germany where they had
was like the
you had
Super Bowl
some of
when
the
it was the
Rock's
World
family.
Cup. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was for
Germany
me. It
was
was
the
just like,
place.
well, I'm always the first one to say I'm not the best wrestler or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? But I must. There was something there that I was good enough to go to Germany, and there was like Dave Taylor, the Head Shrinkers, the Rock's cousins, loads of German, Christian Eckstein, loads of people. Anyway, the guy
Yeah.
first night I never worked there. I was dreading it, but I got over well. And the second night, I'm like, who am I working? You're on against a Jap. And I'm like, oh no, do you know what I mean? Because all I've ever seen is Japanese people that are stiff as anything. And I didn't know the guy that I was on with. He was called Kendo Kashin, did comedy. So I'm really bricking it before I go on there. I ain't going to lie. I thought, oh no, this is like they're going to. Anyway, we had a fantastic match. And I got a fantastic guy. I got on great with him. And then I was in Butlins one day, and Drew McDonald had he's one of the first wrestlers to have a DVD player, portable DVD player. That was really flashback then. And he was watching MMA, and he went, "Do you recognise your mate?" And the guy Kendo Kashin is well known as a guy called Ishisawa, and he was fighting one of the Gracies. And I don't know which Gracie it was because I don't follow him in MMA, but
Yeah.
Ishisawa, and whichever Gracie he fought, it was the second time he fought him because the first time the Gracie beat him and then patted him on the face as he got up. And when Ishisawa won, he done it back to him, And I was just like, oh, I'm so glad you did not show me that the man I was fighting has just beaten one of the Gracies. So I would be thinking, right, where's the nearest airport? I'm just signing my own death warrant. Do you know what I mean? But as it was, he was I mean, like that. Those tours were just, they were so. You were like in Germany, especially looking like this. Back home, then everyone was looking all pretty boy and Hollyoaks and Peter
Yeah.
Andre. It was a bit unusual to have a big baldy head and a two-tone beard. Like this sort of like rugged, like Duck Dynasty thing. I think brought in the big beards of everyone. Do you know what I mean? I was doing this years ago, and suddenly you land in Germany, where like it seemed the fact you were a wrestler, the fact you were British, and the more you looked like Agar the Horrible, it was like suddenly I felt like the frog that had been kissed and turned into a prince. Do you know what I mean? It was just like I can't talk about it because it's one of those. A, it wouldn't sound believable, and B, there's other people out there, and there was loads of people got up to mischief, and it was the devil's playground. But like I used to come home, and I just you didn't want to come home. It was just like it was like being a Make-A-Wish kid in Disneyland. Everywhere you went, you were over like Rover. Pretty girls, lovely food. You get up in the morning, go to the gym, go and have a kip, have a nice lunch, then go and do a show in a great big circus tent that was sold out, and then get on the beer afterwards and have a big party. And it was just, yeah, I could not, it was like pinching yourself. Is this actually, I got, hang on, I'm here for 2 weeks and I get to show off every night and then go out and large it. Yeah, sorry if I'm a tosser for that, but it was absolutely magical. Do you know what I mean?
No, that's what I said. That's why it was the big league. That was if you were any good, that's where you ended up in Europe, wasn't it? That was the place that was. So who else was around you through your
And
career then? Because we've got different styles of wrestling. Saying like you said about you got Kendo Kashin popped up. You said about like different wrestlers along the way as well. I can't remember who you have mentioned now, and what we've talked about was us.
yeah,
But
I mean, I mean,
what sort of because I'm
when
imagining
I
you
when I
sound like the kind
start,
of person that's picking things off of people as you're going along, and like because I imagine we had there was quite an array of talent at that point.
yeah, I mean, like when I started, I was lucky that there was still like a handful, not a handful, it's more than a handful, but there was a few, say a couple of dozen World of Sport people left, still doing it here and there, or still, you know what I mean. So
Yeah,
like I'd be on shows with John Prater, Carl Kramer, um, Ricky Knight, Jimmy Ocean, Johnny Kidd, Drew McDonald was a huge influence. Um, and you'd also go on with people that were coming over at the time. Like it was really mad because you couldn't believe actually seeing them. But like Scott Conway brought over the Bushwhackers or the Barbarian. Sorry, that was Brian Dixon brought over the Barbarian. But like you had Marty Jannetty, you had just different guys that you. It was just really for me. It was really weird because as a kid you never saw any Americans unless it was like an American that was learning his craft or like what I mean. It
yeah,
was very seldom that you got like these superstar people. When Scott first brought over Americans, everyone was ringing up saying, "Is it the real one?" Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? You know, like
I
because
remember that with, I think the first one I remember that was when Yokozuna come
so
over.
many times. That's it.
So first time
Yeah,
I remember, yeah,
yeah,
Yokozuna and that. So
and
yeah.
then like you know, there'd be other guys. Like you'd still get a few FWA guys who work like Andy Simmons or Mark Sloan or James Ty or whatever. But I'll be working guys like Adam Angel, who's no longer wrestling, Justin Starr, Klondike Kate, even. Robbie Brookside would always get in there with me and try and pull the best match he could out of me. Like because like you know he is like he's like a lost scroll of wrestling history, and you go on with him, and like that's one thing is that's nice is that some people would go on with you and work for the show and work to your abilities and try and sort of like their best to try and disguise that you were a bit green and not quite there yet. Do you get me? Whereas other people would, like I said, just get you in there and just totally get you lost and just try and make you look an idiot, you know. So, but no, yeah, it's been mad. I've worked with, you know, it's one of those. It's sort of like you work with so many people. Obviously, then like going on to the All Star crew, there was like Frankie Sloan, Kid Cool, Gangrel, Brody Steele. But like, I suppose for a long time, like I'd go on with different people. But when I got my comedy, when I started finding my own and doing the comedy matches and what have you, and then I got more and more things that I knew worked and that didn't work, and this goes there and what have you. Suddenly, I kind of become. I'm not worried about it because that was my spot on the card, but I was pigeonholed into doing the comedy match and doing all the making everyone laugh. And then sometimes, like I'd be trying to impress my peers by showing them I could do stuff. And then at the end of the day, that Brian Dixon or Scott would come up and say, "Look, you're different because you make everyone laugh. I don't want you to go out there and do cowboys and Indians. I just want you to make everyone laugh and send them home happy." So if they'd had a really violent match before mine, you know, that would be second to last. And if the villain went over and everyone's all irate and angry, let's bring out the daft twat, and like I'll be cacking the referee and doing all the silly shenanigans. And by the end of the night, everyone's laughing and they go home happy and mellow. You know what I mean? So
No, definitely.
yeah, it's. I mean, like I said, there are just so many people you can't remember them all.
I think
Like just
just
on the
people,
spot. Do you know what I mean? It's
or just
just
people maybe that you, well, it's probably again, it's probably, or maybe you sort of saw someone and thought, oh yeah, no, that's good what they do, or I like that bit, or just things you sort of
oh, of
picked up
course, yeah. I
from.
mean, the analogy is not to be crass, but it's like it's like the first time you have sex, you know what I mean? What do? You do what you think you know, and then you learn something from that, and and then eventually you can get as wild as you want, but you get better at it the more you do it. Is my point, you know?
Yeah,
And each match you learn something, or you just pick things up, you know what I mean? Or you learn that like, and the other thing was as well when I started, it was like when I did Villain. The other thing you learned was you had to watch your back because there was idiots in the audience that would get so excited and get so invested. There's a suspension of disbelief is so bad that like I have had people punch me in the back of the head and kickers, and I've never had cigarettes, but I've had the brick in the handbag and all that around the head, and it's sort of like you almost look at them as if you think, bloody hell, that's exactly what you wanted, but you didn't want to get a whack. You know what I mean?
get full
You
on.
didn't.
Yeah,
And the thing is, as well, is that like I tell you, the ones that used to be bad as well sometimes was Down syndromes. There was 2 or 3 Down syndromes at some halls, and they were beautiful, but they got so invested in it, they'd want to run down and fucking stamp on your head or something, you know. And bless them, you can't, you know what I mean? It's one of those. It's like anything. If someone stamps on your head, you get up and you look like that, and then you're like, oh, bless him. Do you know what I mean? And you think, but there was times when, like, of course, when people were in the heat of the moment, someone's just come from behind and whacked, and they've gone like that, whack, and they hit a disabled person or something, like hit a granny, and like that was one of the things you had to learn was like, we won't be like putting your hands on people because, especially now in this day and age, because everyone sues for anything, you know what I mean?
anything.
So,
Yeah,
but and the styles would obviously like wherever you went in the world, it's sort of like in like sort of like Austria out that way, they work stiffer, which was like fair enough. But then there's being just unsafe. I once had a guy we were wrestling in of all things, it was Comic Relief in Germany called Red Nose Day, and we were wrestling. Me
yeah,
and this other guy were wrestling the equivalent of like Ant and Dec in the UK.
yeah.
So it was hard because you've got to try and teach these guys how to do what you're doing. Well, this Austrian guy, he was really hurting them. And I had to say to one of the blokes who was organised, I said, they ain't going to want to do this in a minute. I said, he needs to really chill out on them, you know? Anyway, we had to do a little vignette where, like, they were interviewing the Germans, these two comedians, and they come back to us. And, like, you know, the German comedians are playing a Rubik's Cube and reading a comic in the change room, and we're hitting each other and doing press ups and being all, like,
Yeah.
you know, over the top, macho and brutal. Anyway, like, we said, okay, I said, like, you know, you're our forearm him, here, forearm me, and then we'll put. Anyway, like, he hit me so hard, and I went, oh mate, I said, like, give it a rest, will you? I said, you've just really hit me hard, like, you nearly got me in the throat. Can you give it a rest? So anyway, we've done it a second time, and like, we're filming it, and he's done it again. Every time, Viva Stiff in Austria, and it just started to piss me off because, like, I'm giving you my body because I trust you, because you're meant to be a professional like me. If you're a real hard man, go and do what you guys do. Go and do MMA. But this is kind of the illusion of violence. There's going to be rough and tumble, obviously, but just like hitting someone to put yourself over that you're hard, it just pissed me off. So we had a second take, and he done it again. So I just grabbed his head and headbutted him on the eyebrow and split his eyebrow open. He's like, why did you do this? I said, no, I asked you nicely. Now I'm fucking telling you. Stop hurting me, mate, yeah? But I did not realise this is just, I said, well, we don't work like that in England, mate, yeah? Do you get me? Yes, I'm sorry, Fladdy. I did not. I said, okay, cool, mate. I said, but I've asked you 2 or 3 times politely. They're asking you politely, and you ain't hearing me. I said, I'm sorry, I've cut your eyebrow open, but he got it super glued up. Do you know what I mean? But like, you know, like, it's sort of like you don't want to be a thug and you don't want to be like that. And the last thing I want to do is be like that. I'd rather give you a cuddle than a whack. Do you know what I mean? But some people, like, it's one of those, they just take liberties and they take the piss because they've got some, like, ego that, like, yeah, this is, you know, if you're that hard, why aren't you world champion like Brock Lesnar, like, you know, MMA, you know?
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And
And
maybe
that's the other thing is
it
that,
was
like I
his
said,
character.
yeah, but that's the problem is that, like I said, like, you know, I'm a naturally daft twat, and, like, you know what I mean, I like a giggle and what have you. But I know who I am. I mean, yeah, like I always say, being a professional wrestler is like being Mickey Mouse in Disneyland. If you go to Disneyland, you meet Mickey Mouse, and, oh, Mickey, it's great. Hang on, I'll take the helmet off. I'm Dave. I'll do Mickey Mouse every day. Fuck off, Dave. I want the Mickey Mouse head
Yeah,
on, because I don't care about the bloke in the costume. I want Mickey Mouse. And it's like, with me being a wrestler and what have you, everyone kind of, like, they don't want me to tell them that, like, you know, how are you today? Well, I've had, you know, I've got, you know, I've had my colon removed, and, like, you know, I've been a bit knackered today, and, like, you know, like, this is happening. They just want you to tell them happy, nice day, and so you do end up, like, it's not bullshit, but you give people what they want. But then me, I always say, I'm a meathead who lives in a trailer. I don't take it out of perspective, but some wrestlers, they walk around in an absolute bubble where it's like it almost poisons their brain. They don't know how to be in a real world. Or,
yeah,
like, you know, they're tour ends and they go home and they've got no roots. They've got no friends apart from wrestlers. And, like, you know, I've met some wonderful people through wrestling. I really have. But I've met probably a bigger amount of tossers and ego-driven, like, dickheads, and, like, people who, you know, like, you know, like, some wrestlers, their work is that good that it speaks for itself. But they'll come to you and they will have only one subject of conversation: me. You know, me. Oh, and me, and you know, like, and it's just sort of like, shut the fuck up. If you're that good, you don't need to talk about it. If you're a millionaire, you don't need to tell people how much money you got. Do you know what I mean? If someone's
yeah,
hard, they don't need to talk about how hard they are. They know that. And it's just one of those ones with wrestling. It's just, I suppose it's, I mean, I think sometimes it's just like when I came in the job, no, you know, it was like, who's this? Do you know what I mean? There's always that resentment to the next. We did it bigger and better, and they're tossers, and they said it about
yeah,
us before we came along. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know. I just think, like, like I said, the ebb of person that did do it was once somebody that, like, you know, like myself, they were a bit of a misfit and a bit of a weirdo and haven't always fitted in. Whereas now you've got people trying to act like they don't fit in. Do you get me? Like, they're
yeah,
trying to be something. They're trying to play a part which isn't naturally them. You know, same as when I work the doors. Some doormen are just, they haven't got to be the biggest guy in the world, but they've got to have a presence. They've got to have something, or even if they talk to you, you know, good people skills, whatever. But you can stick a dickhead on the door because the SIA will give anyone a ticket. But whether it's the right peg for the right hole is another thing entirely. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, what advice then would you give? There's anyone listening to this? Maybe they want to switch from, I don't know, whatever jiu-jitsu, martial arts, MMA, maybe try
Well,
wrestling, or just someone who's listening to
yeah.
this who maybe wants to try wrestling from the start. What advice would you give to someone nowadays? Because you said it's
My
different from when
advice
you
would
got in.
be it's totally different to when I got in, but my advice would be, you know, like number one, if you're going to go and get trained by someone, try and choose someone that like has kind of got some sort of reputation, or you know what I mean. There's too many schools out there that like you should be learning how to lock up, take a bump, and run the ropes. Where there's schools that like you say, so what did you learn there yesterday? Oh, we learned Charlotte Flair's finishing move. Walk before you can run, and go to someone with credibility. And also like go there with an open mind on your first training session. See how you feel the next day, because you can either handle a bit of not, you can either take a punch and you can take a kick and you can get a bruise. Not everyone can. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's sort of like go along and just like keep an open mind, keep these open and this shut. That's an old saying in the wrestling. You've heard it. You know what I mean? We've all got an ego to do it, but just keep it under wraps. Do you know what I mean? Like, the crowd will soon cheer you if you're good, and your peers will tell you you're good if they think you're good. But like also, like just think about it all. Like, when when you want to start wrestling, you know, people seem to go there with a perceived idea, like, I'm going to be this character and I'm going to do this and I'm going to get, and it's like, okay, so have you got any gear made? No, no, no. I'm going to wear tracksuit bottoms and, I'm just going to be like and it's like, look, go, I'll give people an address of a seamstress that makes great clothing. There's a great school. I mean, in the south of England, there's a great school like All Star South, which is run by Joel Redman. The guy looks like Lex Luger. He's in great, fantastic shape. He's been to America. He's worked for NXT. He was the first NXT Tag Team Champion. He's been under the learning tree of people like Dusty Rhodes, Robbie Brookside, Norman Smiley, William Regal. And he says even All Star promotions today have got the highest standard of any one short of WWE. It has one of the highest standards of performance. Do you know what I mean? Because you have to be able to do the whole package. So like it's very, very hard for me to say what to do now, but it's just sort of like, if you are going to do it and you have aspirations to go to WWE, just enjoy the journey more than anything, like enjoy going to the school, enjoy finding it all new, enjoy your first performance, enjoy learning and cocking up and pissing people off and doing the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just like, it's a roller coaster ride. Do you know what I mean? And also the other thing is it's hard when you're not wrestling and you're all around a bunch of boisterous boys and boys and girls, and you're going away and it's all like million mile an hour. I used to work at my job alongside the wrestling years ago. We used to be as a waiter at a TGI Friday. So like 1 minute I've got like an hour queue for autographs at the end of my match at Butlins, and then the next day I've got, oi, slaphead, where's my burger? Do you know what I mean? And it was a proper come down, but it kept you real. Yeah, but for me it was good because, like I said, like when I did these things, I'd be at TGI for like a couple of weeks, and I'd go away for a couple of weeks. And by the end of each one, I hated each one. I couldn't wait to go back to normality, whichever that was. And the problem was like, you go back to work with normal people when you think it's funny to go and stick a dwarf porno in the DVD player and press play at night when everyone's eating, because your mates on the road would find that hilarious. But of course, like, you lose perspective and you get your audience wrong at times. Do you know what I mean? So like I said, if you have done MMA or anything like, I was just going to say, if people have done MMA or they have done a ring sport, if people have done a ring sport or they've done MMA or whatever, the one thing I would say is that your shelf life in that is not tremendous. I'm not saying your shelf life in wrestling is tremendous, but then I've had strong men come in. Rob Frampton, the strong man who trained Eddie Hall. He's a natural showman. Obviously, he weren't doing moonsaults off the top rope, but like he was a good showman. He got in there, he could do it, and he was a good. It was a good outlet after being in the world's strongest man and things like that, to still get people going, hooray, and pleased to see you. And that's what I'd say is that, like, or even if for like some I always say some parents, you know what I mean, like, kids end up like, their dad's their absolute hero because they've gone in there and had a go and done it, you know what I mean. Even if you step in the ring and have one professional wrestling match, I do salute you and tip the tap, because at the end of the day, it's loads of people are armchair critics and can say this is crap until you've been in there and done it, and you've done it, and you've done, you've done it from amateur wrestling, professional wrestling. You're really jiu-jitsu. You're into all that, and you've had a go there. And it's one of the greatest feelings in the world. Recently, I've got a guy. There's a guy I've recently sort of like brought into it, who I'm helping train up with people. And like years ago, he had an accident a motorbike accident. He broke 87 bones. But the guy looks like Jason Momoa and Dog the Bounty Hunter. He can take a bump. And like, obviously there's certain things he can't do, but when the guy looks as good as this guy, he's a big handsome bastard, big muscles, long beautiful hair, do you know what I mean? So like, and he's got a great charisma. So like, and this guy, like, he's loving it. But like he said, he's done a skydive, he's done white collar boxing, he's done motorbike jumping, everything. So I've never got the buzz like I did when I was out there in front of those kids wrestling, you know what I mean? And it is addictive, and I dread the day I have to hang up my boots, because like I said, it's one of those ones where everywhere I go, they go, he's the wrestler, not he's just the doorman or just the local meathead. And it's nice when people it's just nice that people can hold you in some sort of regard for making them smile and giving them a nice night out when they were kids, you know what I mean? And invest in youth, because they all grow up, and like. And the other good thing is, like I said, all those kids grow up to be plumbers, electricians. So if Flatliner shitter breaks, I've always got someone that comes around and fix it for a good price. Do you know what I mean? So, it's
what about the things that people might not, so if they're looking at getting arrested, what are the things that people might not be aware of? Because I know for one thing, I think the travel gets underestimated a lot. That was one of the things I've
like
heard. Just
it's the old analogy of, would you travel from here to say Norwich and we're pinning your money on the back of a door, but you're not wrestling? Would you go? You wouldn't entertain it. Do you know what I'm saying? You wouldn't entertain it. But I don't know. It's one of those. I mean, I know people that breed dogs. They travel up and down the country to go and show a dog. Do you know what I mean? They don't get no money for it. They get a rosette if they're lucky, and they get a championship certificate. But that's their passion. Like for me, there's been loads of like I said, Devil's Playground. There's been loads of temptation on the way, but nothing gives me that buzz of popping a crowd and getting all the kids excited and everyone being happy to see you. And then, like I said, I still get the same sort of thing I'll go and work on the door, and I'll get people just walk up because they've had too many Jaeger bombs or nasal decongestant. And they'll say, "Oh, do you dye your beard?" I go, "Nah, mum was raped by a badger." Birds will go, "Are you a pirate?" No, you're a prostitute, love, because you look like one. You have to be quick with banter. And you know what I mean? It's I'll keep going off on bloody tangents. I'm sorry, it's just what I do. Sorry, dude.
Don't worry about that. No, I'm only sort of thinking the other things, because everyone, you've got the training aspect. I was just trying to make, are there any other bits? To say the travel was always one, because like I say, I imagine missing birthdays or missing things like that can be
Oh, yeah, of
things.
course. I mean, that's the nature of the job. It's one of them when you miss weddings, you miss funerals, you miss birthdays, you piss people off. And it's like, as well, like, like for me, I'm either working the door at the weekend or I'll be wrestling. And it's like, people always say to me, "Oh, you coming to my birthday? You coming to?" No, I'll be working. "Oh, but you've got to come." Okay. I'll have my birthday 9 o'clock Monday morning. Will you be there? Well, I'll be at work. Yes, I don't sit at a desk and do a desk job, but I've got to go and earn a living. People don't see it. I don't think they see it like that. Whether do you know what I mean? And like, or like I get guys in it, and you say, "Right, we've got your booking," and they're desperate for bookings. You say, "Right, I've got your booking." "Oh, it's on Mother's Day." "Oh, I can't do that." Well, mate, like, when can you do it then? You know what I mean? You're working on that day. You've got Mother's Day that day, or you can't. So you have to be kind of selfish. But then, like, it's like I always say about the old Johnny Rotten advert. Do I feel sorry for farmers? No, it's their career choice. Do you know what I mean? You have to take the rough with the smooth. You know what I mean? If you're going to be a wrestler, you are going to get injured. you are going to be screwed by promoters who are like a sheep with seven wives. If one won't fuck, the next one will. You know what I mean? And the promoters know that you love doing it. So they have kind of got you by the short and curlies because, like, if they don't use you, you don't wrestle. So it's very, and like, you know, people like Scott Conway, Brian Dixon, and, you know, there's people out there that, you know, like considering that, you know, when you're working for them, you think, oh, bloody hell, I deserve more money and I'm better than that. But when you actually have run shows yourself and you actually do promote shows like we do, you realize how hard it is to keep a big bunch of alpha male, boisterous, juvenile lads all in check. And do you know what I mean? And like, and you've got to go out and, you know, trying to publicise a wrestling show. You can't just do it all on the internet. You've got to put the legwork in and go and put your posters up in the chip shops, the kebab shops, near a school, in a supermarket, and you've got to try and get those posters up. And it's easier said than done, you know. And like, you know, I've gone out for, you know, like you know, like most nights for the last couple of weeks of a show postering just once again because some posters have been ripped down. Or like, you know, I've had it where, funny enough, it was my nipper a little while ago. He phoned me up and he said, check your WhatsApp. And he's drawn a great big dick and a swastika and a Hitler moustache on my poster, my wrestling poster downtown. You know, it's an old one. And I'm like, yeah, cheers, Kai. That's what I expect the people I throw out the club who don't like me to do. Not me son. Nice one, but he's a drummer. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you can't get your head round it till you're in it. And there is a hierarchy and a respect. And there is like, you know, the show should build. So you can't go out in your first match and do every WrestleMania you've ever seen because that leaves nothing for everybody else. You know what I mean? And I've seen punch ups back. It's not that anyone's got copyright on the moves, but if they've been working longer than you, then they dictate that they do it instead of you. Do you know what I mean? It's such a mad subculture, and it never used to be a corporate industry, but as time's gone on, it's got some things are good and some things are bad. Do you know what I mean? There's been good progressions, and there's been some things that have just like you're like, oh, you know what I mean? You know, I mean,
What?
a friend of mine not that long ago, like I said, he's a wrestler. Oh, sorry. There's a
That's
wrestler
right.
recently. I
You
was just
can.
going to say, like, there's a guy that came to there's a guy that came to a wrestler I know recently, or I say recently in the last couple of years. He was
Yeah.
doing a documentary about wrestling and he wanted to be a wrestler. Now, this wrestler is in fantastic shape. In fact, he can do the whole thing. But anyway, so while he's had this guy there, he said to him, look, you know, you can do all the moves, you know, once you get the gear, but you need to look like an athlete. You need to work out, and I would say you do need to improve your physique. And then the documentary became about how my mate gave this bloke body dysmorphia. And like to me, it was just a reality check. He wasn't being unkind. He just said, "Look, mate, you know, you need to sort your physique out if you're going to be a wrestler." Oh, that's giving me body dysmorphia, and you think, "Oh my god, it's just not. If you take yourself that serious, this ain't the job for you." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're
because you're
not going
gonna
to get
get
very
stuff.
far in it anyway.
I
You're
just
going to
remember
get
as a
people.
had a
Go
bit
on.
of advice to that. I remember from the late great Drew McDonald, and he said about like not listening to the crowd. He said because tonight, he said I'll be like the you fat bastard. He said tomorrow night another show. He said I might say the hero, and everyone will be shouting out how wonderful I am and everything else. He said it just changes. It's not personal. It's just the response. It's like a
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
like, you know,
hundred
look at the
percent.
bulk. I mean, the bloke's like nearly 40 stone and he goes out and like, or Klondike Kate, you know, who was a lady who was 20 odd stone, you know what I mean? You know, we're all aware of what we are, hopefully. So when people do, you know, you got to be, it's like me on the door, like I said, I know what I look like, I know what I am. I ain't got a problem if you want to take the piss out of it. You know what I mean? I expect you to. I've made a living out of looking like this. Do you know what I mean? That's my excuse. When I get someone go, oh, you look like a pirate. Yeah, I'll get paid to look a twat. What's your excuse? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. What's then you're saying about what's next for the Flatliner then? Or what's on the card? Is there still anything that you want to achieve in wrestling? Have you got that thing? I still want to do that one thing or achieve that or do this or do that or work with this person or that person. What's have you got anything left on the
All I want
wrestling
to
bucket
keep
list?
well to keep
Go on.
going is my main thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you know tomorrow's not promised, and like you know what I mean. If I can, I mean, doing the style I do, and it's not an aggressive. Yeah, I'm the comedy act on the show, so my shelf life is a lot longer than someone like Sabu. Do you know what I'm saying? So, but if I can keep going, I mean, like I said, I looked 50 odd like Uncle Albert when I started, so it's not like I'm looking too old for it. As long as I'm getting there with, and people are still saying, yeah, we had a good time, and oh bless him, he still had it, and we enjoyed it. I just want to keep going as long as possible, and like outside of wrestling, I'll visit kids' schools, I'll visit youth groups, I'll visit old people's homes, I'll go to hospitals, and it's all about leaving people with a smile. I know I'm not John Cena, and I'm not like I'm sure the kids are sort of like it's just about having a wrestler turn up, tell them not to fight in the playground, try and stay on a positive route, and don't make the mistakes that I've made. Do you know what I mean? And also the other thing is trying to keep the. I mean, this is in your game as well. Everyone is so chemically propelled now, and be it TRT. Samson didn't need steroids. George Ackenschmidt didn't have steroids. You can get a build without injecting something in a needle. And do you know what I mean? They never, I've seen guys like wrestlers from WWE. I was looking forward to meeting them. And you remembering them when they were these great big jacked up guys, and they come over and you're like, Jesus, what happened? Did you get AIDS? They've just shrunk it so much, and they don't look well. And I have hundreds of mates that do it, and it's pick your poison. It's up to you. But I try and tell the kids, go a natural route. Don't just be thinking that the secret is in a pill or in a vial. You know what I mean?
No.
But in the meantime, the other thing I'm really looking forward to is we're gonna sit down and we're gonna get this book sorted, aren't we?
Oh yes, we will. So that's definitely on the cards. So
So
if you stay tuned, everyone, there will be a
that's the next big
Flatliner.
project.
Definitely.
Well, hopefully, I just want to leave a book here that just talks about all the fun times we had with the wrestling and in my life, and all the daftness and all the rainbow chasing. There's a lot of funny stories that's going to be in it,
Yeah.
and no bitterness or nastiness or slagging people off. Just like I'm lucky. Look, I went to at school. People said, "What do you want to be?" I wanted to be a wrestler. Okay, for a short time period, I got into bodybuilding and all that, and I'm glad I got out of that because that's a really toxic industry. And it's just it's really great just to still be doing the wrestling. Do you know what I mean? It's so good. I've gone off on a tangent and totally forgot what I was going on about. Sorry, but there we go.
And
But
like
no, like
future goals, what you're doing, talking to the kids,
yeah, no,
saying about the book and stuff.
yeah. I mean, like I said, it'd be lovely to get a book because I won't be here forever. And just to have a happy book from wrestling, not a bitter and twisted one. I'm still with Uglies, the agent mourning for Milk. I'm constantly getting these auditions through. Some you get, some you don't. I'm still happy to do a bit of acting. If they need a big ugly lump or a big daft sod, I'll do it if it's worth doing. And like I said, just trying to, end of the day, I'm just genuinely trying to be good and do good for the power of good. I don't want an OBE. I'm not doing anything to try and get a pat on the back. It's just nice to go to places and cheer them up. I was at a Down syndrome home the other week. You know what I mean? They're absolutely like, they're God's children. They're just the loveliest, happiest. And they got big old necks on them and they all want to come up and have a wrestle. And it's just like you leave them. And, you know what I mean? It's just nice that you've been able to leave them with a smile and leave them with a bit of happiness and a poster or whatever. Because I remember when I was when I was a kid, all those sort of things. I can remember all the wrestlers that made a fuss of me and all the wrestlers that had no time at all and were charisma bypasses. Do you know what I mean? So to me, I try and
Yes.
make it as special and talk to them and make them happy. And then, like I said, wherever I've gone around, I always got kids. It's Jimmy Savile didn't do me any favors because I'm a big weirdo who lives on his own, although I'm married. And like I said, I'll go for a swim in the summer in the sea right by my house. I end up with kids all around me, and I always get people going, "Why you got all them kids around you?" I'm going, "I'm a wrestler. I'm not Jimmy Savile." Do you know what I mean? Because if I was, I wouldn't say that, But
Yeah.
it's a horrible world you live in now. When I always say invest in youth. Do you know what I mean? Invest in youth because they're the next ones. One day we're going to be old and decrepit. They're the ones that are going to remember how you treated them. You know what I mean? And it's like, I've seen town bullies, and I just think one day you're going to end up. It's all right going around being a bully and being a shithead, but then one day that person's going to have kids. And he's going to tell his kids about you. It's a ripple effect. You know what I mean? Just try and keep the peace and try and There's lots of people that I had to say to the police once when they said about the pub. I said, look, don't think I'd have a lot of these people around my house for a cup of tea. I wouldn't. But it's easier to catch flies of honey than it is vinegar. It's easy just to be all right, smile, turn the other cheek. It gets long turning the other cheek sometimes, because some nights you want to run out there and beat the granny out of them. But bigger picture, the 30 seconds gratification, is it worth hitting someone, them calling the police? Well, they might be a tasty bastard, hit your back and knock you out, and your dignity's in the gutter. So it's just easier a lot of the time. Just don't get me wrong. If it was for my wife or my son, then no limits. But most of the time, if it's just your ego that's being dented because someone's had too much ale, or they're just just an angry, silly person, it's just crack on, mate. Do you know what I mean? And if you do it, and make sure there's no cameras nearby. All right.
And if anyone listening to this wants to keep up with your appearances and your shows or whatever, what's the best way for people to keep up with the Flatliner these days?
The only thing I have social media wise is Instagram. I've got nearly 5,000 people on there, so ain't too bad for Instagram. I don't do Facebook, never have. I don't do a lot of this sort of thing because I've got opinions, but I don't want to upset people, and I'm an old dinosaur, and it's very easy in this day and age, in this climate, to say the wrong thing, drop yourself in it, or drop someone else in it. So, please, anyone listening to this today, don't worry what I have to say. This is the opinion of one person that is sort of like life is one big Monty Python sketch filled with giants, midgets, gypsies, strippers, bodybuilders, bouncers, right across. It doesn't matter, transgender, gay, it doesn't matter. I've got friends in every community, and live and let live. You know what I mean? When your closet's clean, come and clean mine. If you do need to get hold of me in any way, message my Instagram at Fearless Flatliner, or you can get hold of me with Big Powerhouse Wrestling. And and like I said, if people have got things that they've got charity events and or they've got anything like youth events or anything like that, I'm always happy to come along as long as I'm available. And I've got nothing on, then I'm always happy to give up my time for a good cause for the community.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us this week. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and all the best for the future.
Nice one. Same to you, Brett. And let's hope this podcast keeps getting bigger and better.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you once again to the Flatliner for joining us this week. That was episode 28 of the Grapple Rise Show with the Flatliner. I was your host, Brett Summers, and we'll be back next week with another exciting guest. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with everything we do at thegrappleride.com. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and loads of the other ones. Please give us a follow, and that will help you there. If you like to watch your podcasts on our show, you can see us on YouTube. Please give us a subscribe and enable the notifications. Maybe like some of the episodes on there. That really does help us out. If you'd like to listen to your podcasts, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the usual podcast addict, podcatcher type devices. Please give us a listen, give us a like and a review. The little things really do go a long way with that. So anyway, as I say, that's the end of our show this week. So I want you to stay safe, stay on the mats, and we'll see you next time.
I tend to tell people, from an amateur wrestler to a professional wrestler to a cage fighter to being the alpha male of senior citizens now.
I would definitely recommend BJJ. I say quite frequently, I think it's really helped Clay. It's given him some structure, it's given him discipline, and also, but probably the most important thing, it's given him a routine. I mean, with the training, he knows where we're going to be, what day, He goes into the same gym or the same gyms now, because he trains at different gyms, and it's helped him. It's built relationships with his peers. He's got great friends. He's got some great role models in the gyms that he trains at, with not only the coaches but all the adults that are there. And it's just a great environment. It took me by surprise. It wasn't what I expected when we first walked into a gym.
And it's interesting in that there are a number of tournaments that are promised and organized with the Future Federation. And in one of them, there's a clause there will be tournaments with strikes involved, but they will be held under different regulation. And I saw that, and I completely missed that the first time I read that document, right? And I'm going, holy cow. I think that our forefathers, our founding fathers, they had the wisdom to see that a competition rule was going to drift away from the reality of combat, and that a rule set with strike was necessary in order to maintain that foot in reality.
When I qualified for the Olympic Games and being the first female in wrestling for New Zealand, I think that really took the cake. I think that was the best feeling ever, and I think about it often still, and it still makes me feel really good.